Oh, we got 7:30. You ready?
Ready.
Danny, get back up here. Lost Patrick. You ready? All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call our February 6th City Council meeting to order. We'll start with roll call, please.
Tripp?
Here.
Daniels?
Here.
Hunamichael?
Here.
McMorran?
Here.
Lane?
Here.
All are present.
All right. I would invite you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item tonight is our consent agenda. Tonight on the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes from the January 16th City Council meeting, approval of pay ordinance number 990, approval of a bid from Allied Fence and Security for Riverfest park repairs, consider ordinance 2639 revising the animal control regulations, approved maintenance agreement with Mark Neese, approved maintenance agreement with Thane Palmberg, approved consulting proposal regarding new water rights at well 7, 11, and 12. I think we have a revision to the animal
Yes.
control regulations, so we probably need to take that action separately. Would that be?
You could do that, or just note as part of adopting the consent agenda that
Okay.
you're in agreement with these changes. I already gave Brandon
The revised.
revised ordinance and left it on your table.
Okay, yeah. So does anyone have a preference? The revision, I just wanted to strengthen the language to make it clear that leashes are required on public streets, public parks, and public spaces, unless you're in an off-leash area, just to make it clear. So if everybody's in agreement with that, we can do that under consent agenda, or we can pull it and discuss it for later. Is there any other item, anyone would like to remove?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda with the revisions to item 1D. Accepted.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Tripp?
Yes.
Daniels?
Yes.
Hunamichael?
Yes.
McMorran?
Yes.
Lane?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, our next item is call to public. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business not listed on tonight's agenda. The comments that are discussed under call to public may or may not be acted on by the council during this meeting. There is a 4-minute time limit. Does anyone wish to address the council under call to public? All right, I'm not seeing any takers, so we will go to item 3. Consider student designs for City Hall art piece.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Late last year, the City Council approved a contract with the DeSoto Public School District to commission an art piece created by students at the Cedar Trails Exploration Center. Earlier this week, Councilmember Tripp, members of the Arts Council, and myself had an opportunity to meet with students and review their designs. This evening, Tim and the students will present several designs for Council's consideration. We are asking Council to select one piece to move forward for fabrication, with plans for the art piece to be delivered and installed in front of City Hall this summer. I would note that these pieces are very impressive. When we were out there, we were all really impressed with their student work. So it would be appropriate to choose one project for tonight and then maybe consider the other two for future art pieces. We had discussed maybe putting one out at the Riverfest soccer project at that site when that's completed later on this year. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to Tim, and he'll kind of walk you through the project.
All right.
It's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for your time tonight. The students are very, very excited to present I can tell you that for most of my career in education, the questions are like, how do we connect with community? Parent-teacher conferences are getting ready to happen. I will say as an educator that the turnout will not be what is expected. So this is a great opportunity for us to work with community and hear the voices and hopefully create a piece that you guys are all going to be exceptionally proud of. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our first group of students, and they have a presentation here to share with you.
right.
So.
Hi everyone, my name is Zachary Chang, and I'm a student at CTEC CAPS. I'm a member of the CAPS Makerspace project management class. So as Tim Spagel said, this is a really big opportunity for us. It's really impactful being able to really kind of work with customers and see what they want, getting a design brief, a grant, and us being actually to have an idea to create and then something that we can put out in the world that other people will use. It's a very awesome project. And I'll start off by giving a short design brief, an overall, in case you're just now joining us. Next slide. So back at the beginning of the school year, we were presented with a design brief that had a lot of key themes that we wanted, as you can see on the board. It would be kind of very big on inclusivity, kind of equity, harmony, and you'll see that a lot within our sculptures. We're trying to present a picture of the past and the future of DeSoto as a very bright and tight-knit community that's very neighborly. Next slide. So here's kind of the project highlights and timeline. The big thing is that we're trying to have this put in and completely done by mid-July of this year. So that means we'd really appreciate it if you could make a decision today. That would give us a lot of feedback, or even just giving us more feedback today would be awesome. Next slide. So here we kind of took inspiration from the community. We talked to some business owners and whatnot, and you'll kind of see our inspirations here and there, as you can see on the board. You'll see a sunflower and a goat. And then on the next slide, we're going to our first group. But I'd like to preface that a lot of these groups are not 100% finalized yet. We have a lot of big representations and ideas, and we're very susceptible and accepting of changes that you'd like. And with that, I'll move to first group.
So group one is Zach, I'm Lucy Guest, I have Caroline over here, and then a few members who also couldn't make it, but our general concept is a marble gyroscope. If we could go to the next slide. So to go a little bit further into the design brief, we kind of broke up the process into three main phases. So step one was a survey of the space and inspiration. So we think it's very valuable for the sculpture itself to be able to flow into the space. We didn't want it to feel out of place. We think that the current sculpture there does a really good job at representing the space. So we kind of took inspiration from the colors of the zone, as well as the other murals that are existing here, as well as sunflowers, which, we like here in Kansas. So the second step was gathering public opinion. We did this through two main ways. The first one Zach already talked about is getting engagement from the public just through interviews and talking to people who have lived in DeSoto, who just are already here, as well as sending out an online Google form. This was very vital. This was a very vital step in that it made it more accessible to people who we weren't able to directly engage with. The final step was design and implementation. We looked at the Google Doc, we looked at the people that we've talked to, and we decided that there are a few key features that we think represent DeSoto in a very, well-rounded manner that we wanted to make sure we were able to implement into our design. We looked at the water towers, the sunflower ammunition bank, and Panasonic for some key design features. If you move on to the next slide, we talk about how this began to get implemented, and Caroline will take over.
Hello, I am Caroline Maish, and so with our initial design, we wanted to focus on something that was obviously a kinetic feature, which was like your guys' big thing, and we decided that a gyroscope would be really cool. We have it going over two different axes, and we have, on two sides, we have our past and we have our future, and on our past, we're focusing more on like those smoother edges and the angles, and like the farmland, more the rural side of DeSoto. And then we have a few things that stay the same throughout the transition. So we have water towers on both sides showing, like DeSoto's gonna stay the same even with some changes. And we're thinking about having like a marble tube running through it's gonna have blue marbles and like connecting, it's gonna be a river. It's gonna be connecting in between the two pieces. And the future side, we're gonna focus on the suburbs. It's gonna be a little bit more populated, but it's still going to be, the same old DeSoto. And have a few more defined edges just to show the more futuristic futuristic technology side of things. So if you want to go to the next slide, Zach will talk a little bit more about our final design.
Yeah, so as you can see on the board, this is a short kind of animation. Also, you might kind of be able to see both sides. But the big thing about this is we wanted something kinetic and very much interactable. We wanted people to come up, smile, and be like, oh, that's so cool, move it around, and then we also want it to be safe. So your main concerns with the gyroscope may be kind of like safety and whatnot. So I'd like to start off by just kind of talking about how we're going to be putting brakes and things, making sure people can't kind of spin it too much, and just trying to keep it safe. Next slide, please. So on the top, you can see kind of our future side. It's got more districts and kind of more things to do. It's got some public art of its own. It's even got an optical illusion. But really, you'll still see the same things. You'll still see a park. You'll still see water. It's not going to be, unfriendly. You still want people to kind of feel related to it. And on the bottom, you'll see things like the Zimmerman barn, a windmill, some topography, and then the water tower, of course. Anything else to add? Okay. That's it for Group 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackson Lucas. We're part of Group 2, and this is...
I'm Eli Elsner.
And then within our group, we also have Bella Guess and Cole. I forgot his last name. That's Cole Hawkins. And we'll start off passing around a 3D model that we ended up making today. And we do also want to stress on this one, this is just a concept. Multiple things that we would like to improve, as well as concerns from you, as well as ideas from you that we could use to improve this. So let me pass that around. So when it came to this design, when we were looking for ideas, we ended up coming across this gold model of a hand. And we came with the idea of the helpful hand. And that was kind of the phrase that we kind of took throughout all of this. And the model that we're showing is a representation of that. We ended up realizing we can't defy physics, and that floating hand, we would have no way of mounting to anything. So we ended up scrapping the top one and ended up going for a look where it's somebody reaching down to help someone else up. In this case, it would be progression reaching down to DeSoto to help it progress. And as you can see, we have some of our designs. Unfortunately, we have two of the same picture. It's unfortunate. And as you can see in the middle 4 boxes, we have the top left one. That was kind of the first design we came with when the Art Council showed up at CTEC. And we weren't very proud of it. It wasn't all we had hoped it would have been. And then through the ideas of the Art Council and further looking into DeSoto's values, we ended up going towards what we have now. And the best representation is the top right corner, showing the hand with the windmill in the center. And with that hand, the windmill is operational. It works. And it would, when you saw the model, it was on somewhat of a podium. The raised center of that bigger circle would be stationary, stuck to the hand. And the larger, lower circle would rotate. And on that, on the brim, it would show DeSoto, and it was some of its water towers and what it is now. It would slowly rotate as the windmill would rotate, kind of leaning towards progression, growing bigger, and showing what we are hoping to get out of Panasonic in the future. And as you can see from the bottom right model, we're going for more of an angular design, more flat faces, mainly because a bronze cast would immediately eat up the budget. Looks cool, but not very practical. And when we talk about flat faces, that goes into manufacturing. Still difficult, but a lot easier, considering we can cut sheet metal out and then weld it together, which is something we can all learn as students. And next slide, please. Do you want to talk about the waves?
And attached to the windmill, we're going to have a metal oscillating sheet that will go like that, like symbolizing the river and how it flows through Kansas. And on the blades, we are considering putting on murals and other art designs on the flat edges of the blades as they rotate, showing DeSoto and their community. And we are placing this for safety reasons above a height that cannot be achievable if someone wanted to like push it. So no one could get injured through the blades when they're rotating. Yeah.
And so another way we could implement the river and water would be on the larger, back to the larger podium. On the sides, if it were raised, we would have this wavy pattern that could be achieved through small metal wiring or tubes that could then be bent and then welded onto the sides. And they could be moved opposite of one another to achieve a water look with the river on the edge of DeSoto. And back to the safety concerns. With this being a statue that's readily accessible to the public, people will most likely try and climb it. So in order to deter that, we have opted to tilt the hand at an angle so people cannot climb on it. It would be nearly impossible to walk up it, and the windmill would be placed at a height to where hopefully no aspiring basketball players could hit their head. And yeah, and back to what he said, the murals. We are an art school. We don't just do engineering. We have very talented artists. And so we talk about the goat mural and the sunflower mural in downtown. We could also end up making our own mural, maybe one representing Panasonic or completely coming up with our own original ones. And on the very right of the screen, we have a concept that originally I remember hearing mentions of noise being not wanting noise to be a factor. But what could happen is it could since the top turns underneath it, it could generate wind using blades that could then be pushed through a pipe leading to more pipes that could then end up making sound. And so maybe based on the speed of the winds and all that, it could create a unique sound, which could also be turned off through the use of plugs or scrapped entirely. And that's seemingly all we have right now.
What do you see as the dimension of this hand? How big is this hand?
So the hand itself might roughly be from fingertip to where we'd cut it off would probably be one of those tables lengths. The windmill itself might be a little higher, just to avoid anyone accidentally getting hit by it.
By a blade.
Because a windmill spinning, even if it's not going too fast, it's heavy.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to get a sense of the scale you were thinking.
of course.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Aiden Emerson.
And I'm Ben Gosh.
We two other group members, Adam Mack and Grant Geeka, who couldn't make it. So I'll start off with saying we do have a sculpture. We will pass it around, very gentle. I will say this is a very rough draft. It's almost kind of put together, kind of sloppy, not really. But trust me, making that Tenzugretti part I'll talk about later is not easy. So in our group, I'll be honest, we're all kind of fabricators working the shop. We're not a ton of artists. So what I wanted to do was make something that make people go, wow. Make people stare at it and go, how does this work? So what I want to do is add a Tenzugretti. Kind of what that is it's almost a kind of gravity-defying kind of thing. You look at it and you're like, how is that standing? So we have that in the middle. The reason I really wanted to do this was, to me, it kind of represented the DeSoto community. If one of those strings is off a tad, the whole thing falls, or the whole thing goes to the left or the right or collapses. But if they all work together, it stands, it looks cool. And I think that represents the DeSoto well, showing the togetherness, the teamwork, the community as a whole coming together to keep this great city running. But we'll start at the top. The top is going to be your kind of present to future DeSoto. So to the right is the kind of wildlife area. When the art community came over, they really stressed a couple things. One of them was the wildlife and they really liked foxes, turkey, and deer. They really loved that. So we wanted to implement that. So we left a little area to have some trees, maybe add some foxes, some turkeys, some deer. And then in the middle, we have our main kind of lane. They all stressed to every group that they do not want a city. And so a lot of people had to change that. So we kind of went with that center road, almost more suburban, kind of just the present DeSoto. And then to the right, we have our new power plant, the Panasonic, kind of symbolized by the big steam stacks. I also kind of put the steam stacks in a little building in the back in a certain place, so it's almost as a wind catcher. So if the wind blows up against that, it's going to get stuck there. So hopefully we can make it spin. Another kinetic part is making that 10 degree ready. You can loosen a little bit, so it almost kind of sways side to side, which is also very nice. And then for the bottom, it's very simple. We wanted to go past humble beginnings, very flat plains of Kansas. So it's very simple. It's one little house. That is a goat. It had horns. Trust me, it had horns. And you would have, been able to tell, but they fell off. I don't know how, but we know the goat painting you saw early in their slides is very passionate to you, so we wanted to add that. But it's pretty much it. So, yeah. Any questions? Oh, and then also the scale. We kind of put a rough draft there of 6 feet by 4 feet, and then 9 feet tall. Kind of giving a rough idea. We could maybe change that, but that's kind of our idea so far. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Good.
So, Mayor, the ask tonight is for council to discuss amongst themselves and, if appropriate, select one piece. I will say I'm not envious of you to make this decision. This is excellent work from the students. And I just want to reiterate that if you choose one piece today, the other two could come back for future considerations in future years at different sites. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you and the council to kind of start your discussion.
All right, so the first group I neglected to ask you guys, how big is that gyroscope? How big do you see that piece being?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're trying to kind of scale it around like a person, and really a lot of this kind of 3D model can get scaled up very easily. But right now it's 84 inches tall and then about 72 inches wide.
So okay, 7 foot tall, 6 foot wide. Okay, they're all kind of in that same bigness. All right. Thoughts from council? Anybody want to start? I think I'll just start. I'll just throw some thoughts. I thought the first piece kind of grabbed the kinetic piece that maybe more than it's not your lack of design, it's probably my lack of vision, not being able to see the other two kind of how, like the last one, I'm not seeing the kinetic element to that as well. But I just saw the first piece kind of, it really captured the kinetic elements pretty well. I liked a couple of other elements about that, the flipping of the past to the future and the river, the connection between the two. So in fact, those two things kind of stood out to me and spoke to me as some strong points for the first group. Fine work on the other ones. I like the string and the fine connection between failure and standing and the hand. I like that. So nothing to take away from your designs, but I did like the kinetic gyroscope piece. It's kind of what I spoke to me from the group.
Yeah, I'll throw in. I like the gyroscope thing. You know, you went first, and so you had the advantage there. But I like the mechanics of it. I like that flipping from the past to the future. You spoke of safety. I probably would be a little concerned that, you know, that there could be a situation where somebody get a finger or hand caught in it. You know, that's a concern. But I like that, and so I like that from the mechanics perspective. Helping Hands, I like that one really from the theme. I really like the Helping Hands theme, and you know, applying that in some way. You know, I really like the one that you showed where it was the two, you know, one hand actually helping the other, but something creative with it. So thematically, I probably like that one, the idea of Helping Hands.
I'll jump in. You know, I had the joy of getting to visit ahead of time, and one of the things I have to say is I'm very impressed at the progression from having just visited you all to tonight. So kudos to you, and kudos to all the groups for the presentation you put together, and the care and time that clearly went into thinking through the entire project, as well as how to explain each of them and bring them to life. I may have been Brendan's ear a little bit to say, what if we can't make a decision? Which is where this is how this evolves. So you know, I'm very optimistic that maybe we'll be walking away from here with, you know, not only art for the short term, but maybe longer term future as well. You know, then it gets to the hard part. So, you know, I think there are elements of each that are really, really unique. I think thematically, and even with the, you know, location here in front of City Hall, I think that Helping Hand and the kind of capturing of that thematically really speaks to me. You know, the soccer fields, having that as a future idea, I could see the gyroscope being really beautiful, especially with the location right there by the river. But, you know, I do think, you know, that one was one with the movement, the marble, and then kind of the sunflowers, that hidden piece of it really was neat to see how that all evolved. But yeah, there's some initial thoughts.
I was gonna say, good job across the board, the themes. I like the gyroscope concept, I like what it presents, the theme of the Helping Hands, the Tinsgritty. I like the strings, I like how that plays out. The only one thing on the Tinsgritty is if it's 9 feet tall and I'm 6'2", seeing the city on top of it, I might have to, even as a tall person, elevate myself to try and see some of the elements on it. But if I was picking one tonight, I'd probably lean towards the gyroscope.
Oh, I don't know. I like them all. I did have the same concern about the gyroscope with the fingers. Is there any sort of gap? So, like, if some kid comes and spins it, they're not getting their hand stuck in there?
We had thought about maybe elevating it a little bit, so putting a pedestal a couple feet up, so that small children couldn't get their hands in there.
Okay.
So that, you know,
I'm
you
not
can't,
too
yeah.
concerned about adults. I hope they're smart enough not to.
Yeah.
But it's the kids. I don't want them to like spin
Yeah.
it.
Okay. So I do, yes. So we plan on having like a base underneath the gyroscope, and it's gonna be around like 17 inches tall. So that'll get that little boost. And then we're thinking about making like the plane that everything's on like 52 inches tall. So that's like, you're not gonna be able to, we might lower that a little bit so like little kids can see, but you won't be able to like reach up and touch. But we're also gonna have gaps in between the buildings, like that your fingers are not gonna get caught in. And it will, like, we'll have brakes on the gyroscope, so you won't be able to spin it so fast that you'll get caught, but I do completely understand the concern of that. So. Anything to add to that? Please go ahead.
I will mention that I'm not sure if it was super able to be seen on the smaller model, but when we scale it up, there's enough room to where nobody can get their arm in between the two rings. So we took that into consideration, and we will definitely do that moving forward.
And we've already checked into additional insurance coverage.
Yeah, what's your insurance policy?
Yeah.
But I really like that one. That one's fun and like interactive. for people? The gyroscope one? I like them all. It's really hard. You guys made it really hard.
Danny, any thoughts?
Well, I'm truly amazed, all three of you groups, they're just fantastic, and your ideas, and it's just truly amazing what you guys has come up with and getting to share your thoughts here. It was exciting, and see your enthusiasm for each one of those too. That was really great. And I liked all three of them, of course, too. But since we have to try to make a conclusion to this, I think probably I would go with the gyroscope as far as I'm concerned. I think it was good planning, and I like the hand awful lot, the helping hand. Boy, you've captured DeSoto, all three of you guys, groups, just did fantastic. I'm very proud and excited. So that's all I have to say. So go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. So, Brandon?
Mayor, I think what I'm hearing is, I was counting noses, I think I heard 3 for option number 1. And my suggestion would be to maybe take the hands and the other one, and those would be proposals for next year's public art program. And so we could potentially work with the school district again to put another piece somewhere else in DeSoto at a predetermined location.
So I guess one question I have on that is how many of them are seniors and would not be here?
I think
I want them all coming back.
Yeah, I think there's just one. Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
what I heard. Just one. Yeah.
I was gonna
Two?
say, and or then again, would we want to
Uh-huh.
give another student group the chance to go through the same process and have other ideas too? So,
Yeah.
but if all of but one are coming back, then they could recycle the ideas or come up with new ones too.
We're
Is
fine.
there a way to put all of them in one?
Gyroscope in the middle of the
It's a
3D square.
gyroscope, and then you have
The
the.
We joked about all of the components coming together into one. But as I mentioned, like this collaboration, so having, individuals from the Public Art Council and City Council into the building to visit with the students and give feedback was, I can't tell you how exciting that was for our students. And yes, I'm their instructor and administrator, but for them to work with you is incredibly impactful. So any type of a dialogue we could have like this moving forward, and insight that you guys might have would be welcomed. So if it's really hard to pinpoint one, we'd love to keep the dialogue going as well, and maybe bring just something that the city is gonna really, really resonate with is, I think, the best objective moving forward.
Yeah, kind of to where Rob was going. Could the hand be holding the gyroscope?
Right, yeah.
Instead of
Right,
waiting.
that's right.
And
Good point.
then how do you get number 3 in?
I think that's its own unique piece, and maybe it's too much to try and throw a city on top and above. But I think there's just a lot of elements of it that are, it doesn't need kind of that extra stuff. It needs maybe something else to, because I like that it takes everything big and small to keep everything working together, Everybody working together is what it takes to get stuff done.
I mean, we've been talking about, the pedestal and the gyroscope having to be a little elevated anyway. So, I mean, I am kind of liking this idea.
Blending it all together.
All uniting them, yeah.
Having the hand be the pedestal for your gyroscope.
You guys collaborate and make that happen.
That would be our design direction, I guess, for you then, right? I don't know what it does to the budget, if that.
We could always talk about that.
Right.
There's excess money in that.
Right.
In that
You
fund.
guys are open, yeah, and
Yeah.
the metal, that faceted metal style of the hand,
Yeah.
it is more steel to do those
Right.
planes.
Mhm.
But not overly cost prohibitive. I think we could talk about that. Make it happen. Just make it happen for you guys.
Yeah, we could definitely work at the staff. Tim and I can come up with another
Okay.
proposal.
All right, what do you want from us?
I don't know if we don't necessarily need to vote. What I heard was option.
I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think that's
The option 1/2, is that kind of what I heard?
option 1/2, yeah, option 1 and then incorporate.
Okay.
And would city council and public art council be willing to collaborate more, like coming into CTEC and kind of
Anytime.
doing more, like, cause the kids would be more than happy to kind of like then take this back to the drawing board, give you another model, and then get feedback and have that dynamic going forward. That could push the install date out a little bit, but I'm always looking for ways to get these amazing kids back to my program before they go off to college. This is a graduate right here too, so you're off at K-State now, and or KU. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Whoa! I apologize. And my son goes to KU, and he knows you. So, but you know, anything to bring the kids back and keep working on something like this.
Right.
It's very, very impactful for their lives and all of ours, and for communities.
Yeah.
So, thank you for having us the opportunity.
Thank you all.
Hands holding the gyroscope.
Yeah,
The hands.
I like
Yeah, you have to put the goat next to it.
It's okay.
It's gonna have to be right next to it. Put the goat.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. You're welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, or you're welcome to leave if you have other obligations.
She said SAD tomorrow. I know robotics kids are in the meeting, so
Thank you.
thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Jackson, ooh, my kids
We'll move on. Our next item on our agenda is item 4A, receive results from the 2024 Citizen Satisfaction Survey.
If you open PowerPoint or the PDF, both of them have a whatever's easier to
Well, good evening, Council. I would like to introduce and welcome back Ryan Murray from the ETC Institute. He's the Assistant Director of Community Research, but for the past 2 surveys, he has been basically our program manager, so he's going to take some time and walk through our 2024 Community Satisfaction Survey results.
All right, thanks, Whitney. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Good to see you again, Mr. City Administrator, and the assistant's gone now, so I was going to say hi to him too. I saw him the other day. There he is. Good to see you, Brandon. Yeah, so it's great to see everybody again. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a local guy, born and raised in the area. Lived in Olathe most of my life. Went to KU, moved to Missouri. I'm an alderman there now in the city of Greenwood. It's about 6,500 people. Since my last time, I think I won my first election. And going back in April, so I'm kind of sitting in that boat with you guys. But tonight, I'm the consultant. And basically what I'm going to do tonight is go over our survey results, and I'm hoping I've got a clicker. And if not, I can just call next slide. Cool.
Yeah, you're gonna have to
Good deal. Sounds good. Yeah, so let's go next slide.
Universal hand signal.
Yeah, so we'll go next slide. ETC Institute, down the road, about 20-minute drive from here. We've been based in Olathe, Kansas, the entire existence of the company, about 40 years. I've been there technically about 20. Since I was in high school, I've been working there, doing phone calls when that still all worked. But we're not doing that anymore. We're doing it a little bit more sophisticated way, but really just we are the nation's leader in market research for local government organizations. We do a lot of work specifically for municipalities throughout the state. We basically do everybody in the metro area from, Warrensburg all the way out to Topeka for the most part. In this particular assessment of your survey results, what I want to do is really frame up the perspective from which I've reviewed them. So I'm an elected official as well, but tonight again I'm the consultant. I have my consultant hat on. And so this is an objective assessment of the delivery of city services in the eyes of the residents in the city of DeSoto during a period of time. And so I like to put that little caveat on there when we aren't presenting results immediately after we've received them. It's always kind of a snapshot in time, and a lot of outside factors can have many impacts on our perceptions. So national rhetoric, news stories, things like that can have massive impacts. We see it specifically in the city of Dallas and in Texas communities where a few years ago, Dallas was named the deadliest city in Texas or maybe even the nation by their local news just before our survey arrived in mailboxes. And that year, police and public safety was the biggest priority for their survey. So massive impacts can happen based on national discussions, based on news stories and things like that. And so I always like to kind of put that snapshot in time situation in there. But really, we're gathering input. It's meant to be an objective assessment. We're objectively asking these questions. We're asking folks to rate their overall satisfaction. And we're going to track your performance from the past survey as well as our benchmarking, local and regional benchmarks. Like prior surveys, it was administered in 2022. About the same survey instrument. The core questions are all there. We added and changed just a few things. We administered the survey the same way that we did back in 2022. We mailed that survey out to all households in the city. Anybody that didn't receive one could have called us and received a paper copy, but the online survey link was also open. And so we were managing the sample based on a list of residential addresses within the city, one survey per residential address. And the sample is designed to ensure statistical validity in the sense that we're including every residential address within the city's limits. And then we're looking at demographics to ensure that we're accurately or closely relating those overall results to the census demographics for the community. And so the idea is not only to make sure that every household has an equal opportunity of being selected to participate, or in this instance, every household is selected to participate. We want to make sure that we're getting good geographic as well as demographic distribution in the data. Overall, we collected 500 completed surveys, just slightly less than we did last time. Response rates are tumbling nationally. I told my team DeSoto really expects a good response rate here. The city showed up for us. It's not something that I did or pulled levers on or anything like that. My goal for this survey, and I discussed this a little bit with Whitney again when we started off again, based on the size of your community, I would be very happy to get 250 surveys. And so that when I've sent multiple scopes out in the last few weeks for communities about this size, I say, hey, if we can get 250, I'll feel really lucky. That's about a 6% margin of error. Your results are just under 4. For the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to use the 4% for our margin of error. It's really 3.8% at the 95% level of confidence. So if I went out, mailed a survey to everybody, followed up with everybody, did it in the same methodological way that I did it this time, 95 out of 100 times I should get these same results. So plus or minus that 4%. So if we ask everybody in our survey if they like the color green, and 50% of people, 250 said yes, and 250 said no, 95 out of 100 times, I'm going to get about 54% or 46% of people to say that they like green. So it's kind of going to range plus or minus that 4% based on what we saw in our survey results here. So very accurate given the size of the community. The only way to really ensure further accuracy would have really been to double our surveys, and it would have dropped your margin of error to about 3 or 4%, or 3 or 2.5%. So you would have had to have gotten a lot more surveys to really drop it below that. If we go to our next slide. We'll actually skip forward too, and I'll try to do that. Usually I'm the clicker, so I'll be able to do that. But overall satisfaction. And so as I mentioned at the top there, a lot of this is perceptions, and so we do want to start with some perceptions. And what we really want to do is just understand generally how people feel about the community. Over the last couple of years, this has been really difficult, and it typically rises and ebbs and flows with election season. And the last two, 2016, 20, and 24, have been very difficult for most municipalities when it comes to perception-related items. Specifically, when we look at overall value of taxes and fees, you weren't hit very hard this particular survey, but a lot of communities have seen topsy-turvy results on that. Quality of elected leadership and things like that have taken massive hits. And some of our communities are really taking hits, like also in DEI stuff. And so where we've had surveys in the past have a lot of DEI questions, those have taken hits as well. And so we've seen shifting perceptions that we suggest interim surveys. So usually folks will do every couple of years. We would suggest interim surveys. You'd see a little bit of a tick up. But what the overall results are telling us is that the results are consistent. The city's consistently performed, consistently kept perceptions relatively high. 7 of the 10 areas were directly comparable to our database. You performed well above our national or regional averages in 5 and 4 of those areas respectively. If we go to our next slide, we'll see the overall satisfaction with major categories of city services. Again, very much in the eye of the beholder. The top one is quality of customer service you receive from city employees. Really high ratings. We'll see some more of that towards the end. About half of your respondents indicated they'd contacted the city over the last year, so about 250 people. So margins of error will hang a little bit higher on those survey questions, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But national and regional benchmarking shows that the city's continuing to perform well. You've seen increases in some key areas such as overall quality of water services. We've seen stagnation, 70% satisfaction in both 2022 and 2024 on street maintenance, which is actually a really good sign, a really difficult area to keep on having about 70%, 74% of people being affected or satisfied. And as smaller communities experience growth, there are pain points, difficulties, and we've seen the overall quality of city land use and development planning suffer as a result. Again, perceptions. Most folks aren't in here. Most folks, or at least I imagine most of your planning and zoning commission meetings are not packed to the brim most of the time. So I do want to always kind of give this a sense that folks are assessing their opinion. And so some of this is opinionated based. It's not always based on the performance in which you're designating land use or development. It can just be, hey, I'm just not real happy with what I've seen and I'm going to mark this down, or hey, generally I think the city's moving in the right direction and I'm going to mark it up. And so that's where you'll kind of see some ups and downs on those two particular items. But I thought one of the two biggest things here is really the focus on effectiveness of city communication with the public, which didn't see a significant change in overall satisfaction, but dropped out of our high priorities for improvement. And one of the other areas, the overall quality of water and wastewater services, struggled a little bit in our billing areas, which we'll get to in a few moments, but really it dropped again out of our higher priority, or yeah, it stayed somewhat out of our higher priorities for improvement. Really, the city land use and development planning is the biggest concern for most residents. If we go to our next slide, we'll see the importance for the following reasons. Respondents live in DeSoto, and I highlight this because it's a little bit different, extremely important down to less or not important. It's not a satisfaction scale. And so we've asked the importance for various reasons. A lot of people are moving here for the safety and security, quality of the public schools, that small town feel. We see a little bit of a drop off, but what I'm really looking at are some of the items towards the bottom. Most of your community members who completed the survey indicated that the proximity to Lawrence is not a draw for them here in DeSoto. Employment opportunities for a large group of folks are less or non-important. And then located in the Kansas City metro area kind of split. And so there's a few down there towards the bottom that we probably should focus less on, and a few at the top that we really want to harp on when we say, hey, come to DeSoto. These are the reasons why. People are safe and secure. We have great schools, and it's a small town feel. And you'll resonate with residents here. There will be some marketing and communication that you'll want to discover outside of this particular community too, to draw people in. But if we go to our next slide, we'll go actually forward to, and I apologize, satisfaction with major city services. Last year we didn't have any trends, but this year I wanted to bring up some trends. Of the 7 areas that were comparable to 2022 results, city saw 1 significant increase, 2 significant decreases. Those are 4 percentage point drops. And so what I wanted to really point out tonight is, for example, effectiveness of city communication with the public. It went from 60 to 59 combined very satisfied and satisfied scores. That's really a negligible difference. It could have been 61% easily. Given our margin of error, that's really where we're assessing a true difference in opinion. There's been an actual effect or an actual impact on perceptions within the community that are exceeding our margin of error from the past results and these results. Those are significant differences. And so I want to point out overall quality of water and wastewater services, which was a high priority for improvement last time. Lower satisfaction, higher emphasis placed on it. Quality of life law enforcement are one of those areas that are getting hit with those perception-related items. And we've seen that nationally. We've seen quality of law enforcement in places like Texas even see dips in those ratings. I was in Round Rock, Texas this past fall. They saw a small dip in their overall public safety ratings. Really high-performing organization similar to DeSoto, but again, perceptions were shaken. It was more so about, hey, continue to emphasize this item there in Round Rock than anything else, and we'll see a little bit of that as well in our importance. If we go to our next slide, a few of the largest increases in satisfaction, quality of downtown DeSoto. I know you added a couple of business, made a couple of changes, beautification of downtown, how well the city keeps you informed about water quality issues. I know there was a boil water alert. It sounds like the city really effectively communicated that, but responded very quickly and very well. Based on the perceptions that we received, it sounds like everybody's very happy. When we look at water-specific items, and the only items that really suffered in terms of positive satisfaction were related to bills. So the overall quality of water services, perceptions have raised. People don't like their bills still, and we'll see that. But it was a really interesting thing, and it was something that's really nice to see when we come here and we talk about the important satisfaction analysis. You really focused in on it. You focused in on your water. You communicated on it. You effectively met a difficult item, a difficult issue of the boil water, and you've overcome it and saw a massive increase. Condition of your park equipment, availability of park info about parks and recreation is the next one. And then we'll see a few decreases here as well. These are some of the largest decreases that we had. Again, 58 of the areas were assessed from 2022 to 2024. About 45% saw increases, about 55% saw negative changes in satisfaction. So as a place you would buy a next home, and these are really perception-related items, but it's where you'd buy your next home, development and planning, quality of life, and then it's water billing issues. And so we'll see that again in just a few moments. I've asked Whitney a few times if there's issues with the water bills. Did they change? There seems to be no issues. There seems to be no changes. it's very much likely, if we had what you're charged for water service is a question some people asked, if we included that as well, I'd assume that would be the item that's getting hit. But because these two are bill related, it's most likely that they're hitting you for that. So if we move forward just a little bit, we'll see rating of current availability of housing. One of our decreases was availability of housing or affordable housing in the community. When we asked folks if we think there's too much, the right amount in the middle there, or not enough, we saw single family residential, affordable housing, and senior housing really say, hey, we're not having enough. We don't see enough in our community. That is kind of based on your current community demographics, knowing multifamily residential, a lot of folks locally are saying, hey, a little bit too fast. We're seeing a little bit too much. It is nice, though, that only 1/3 of respondents indicated it's too much. Another third basically said it's just right. About 1/3 or 1/4 said not enough. And so while there is always going to be this sense of, hey, we don't want to see more multifamily, it's not such a tense effort like some of the single-family residential or even the affordable housing where 69% of people said there's not enough. If we go to our next one, we'll see current pace of development. Again, much too slow and too slow out to the left. Too fast or much too fast out to the right. Really, retail development, moving too slowly. Single-family residential, same as the last slide, just moving a little bit slowly for folks. And then the two items that you're dealing with and having contentions with residents, I'm sure, is industrial development and multifamily development. Those could be difficult items where there's a predominant homeownership group within the community, and you have a lot of homeowners. So if we go to our next two slides, we'll look at benchmarks. What we're doing here is really just assessing you against national and regional averages. For the arrows, I've really just focused on the national averages for the most part, but we'll see some of both there. And what you can see is that contextually, you're performing extremely well in all of these categories. Now, we don't have the land use and planning one on here. We don't benchmark for that particular item. But when we talk about communication, when we talk about quality of water services, we're performing extremely well when we talk about comparisons. If we go to our next slide, we'll see perceptions of the city. We're again performing extremely well. What this really tells us is that even though we saw dips, even though we saw changes within or without or exceeding our margin of error in some of these areas, we are still performing very well, and we're still performing either above Plains or regional or U.S. averages in many of the key areas, including the value received for city tax dollars and fees, which has been really difficult for most communities to see that. If we move forward again, we'll see overall ratings of the city as a place to live, as a place to raise children, both significantly above. 80% of people is a lot of people. Considering the amount of people that completed the survey, 80% is extremely strong. We do see as a place where you would buy your next home, but considering who lives here now and they're a little frustrated with some of the multifamily potentially, that's probably where you're seeing that as well. Likely a lack of understanding of where the future of the city is likely to go. And as a place to work, again, just not a lot of people here locally currently seeing that. But again, something that the city of DeSoto can definitely push out that image, push forward, hey, we're moving forward or we're moving in a different direction. We can go forward. Satisfaction with city leadership, both above the national average. We saw dips in overall satisfaction from 2022, but you're still performing well above national and regional averages. And we'll go forward, I think, one more, and it's probably actually a couple more. All of our street maintenance items well above. A difficult item, especially the maintenance of sidewalks. Most cities aren't maintaining sidewalks. It's resident responsibility. That's a really difficult one. If we move forward again, water and wastewater utilities. Quality of drinking water below national and regional averages, same as last time. What you're charged for water, 39%, just right there with national and regional averages. So we do ask I'm still boggled by why folks are not happy with your bills and why those decrease so much. I'd love to do a follow-up, and we might try that. Satisfaction with code enforcement. This is a difficult one. I think we talked about this a little bit last time. I think there's been some thoughts, hey, we need more proactive enforcement. Hey, maybe we don't. It sounds like the city's more reactive than they are proactive currently. That can be difficult for some residents. It could be difficult for others if you're more proactive. And so I imagine if you begin a more proactive approach, you're going to have the same levels of satisfaction. It's just going to be different people. It's going to be the switch of people. So the people that wanted you to enforce and you're not, they're going to be happy, and the people being enforced upon are not going to be happy. We deal with this similarly in my community. A lot of it is the misunderstanding of zoning. And so we've got a lot of R1 mixed with ag, mixed with industrial throughout our city. It can be really confusing for folks that live next door to it. We hear a lot of stuff that's not technically out of code, and we're getting calls on it a lot. But that could be happening, it could not be happening here. It's just a really difficult issue for folks within communities. If we go forward, I think, okay, one more, and then I think this should be the last one before we'll bump into another intro slide. But satisfaction with communication, one of the strongest areas that saw massive increases in overall satisfaction. It dropped out of our overall quality or our overall top priorities for improvement. Social media well above, efforts to inform, city's website and availability of information. So performing extremely well there. If I'm not mistaken, this is the last benchmarking chart. Opportunities is our important satisfaction analysis. We can go forward one more. I've already showed you this chart. Previously, I included some colored arrows to indicate overall quality of street maintenance. Satisfaction stayed the same. Quality of wastewater services went up. Overall quality of city land use went down just slightly. These are our overall satisfaction numbers. The important satisfaction analysis is going to focus in on areas with below average satisfaction. And in our next slide, we'll see the importance or the emphasis ranking. And so we asked respondents to indicate which services they think are most important for the city to provide. While we're going to see water and wastewater services and quality of street maintenance as higher priorities, it really is the focus of most residents is the overall quality of city land use and development. If we go to our next slide, we'll see how far and away that one is. I've highlighted the city water and wastewater utility services because it is a relatively high important satisfaction ranking. If you look over there to the 0.1447, it would take kind of a 5 to 6 percentage point swing on those items in water and water utility services to see that difference. So it's out of margin of error. So it would take a significant change. The city land use and development planning is by far the most important item. It's by far the least rated satisfaction item, and it's the item that most residents are probably just a little bit concerned about, probably could use some additional information. And what the problem is there is that the city probably doesn't have all the information that the residents want yet. And so there's a lot of planning for the future, and sometimes there's just some unknowns there for folks. It's happening in my community. We're going through a comp plan process right now. We're having residents that are showing up really wondering where the city's going to go over the next 10 years, and they're screaming about multifamily to us as well. So I'm in the same exact boat. If we go in the next slide, additional findings, what I want to do is just go through some of the additional questions that we asked. In 2022, you all were kind of building up your Parks and Rec stuff. We asked a few interesting questions. We kept a couple of those in here, and we asked if you had a desire or need for any additional programming. Special events is that common one. We do a lot of Parks and Recreation consulting. I probably do about 150 of these a year. Special events is a really common interest topic for residents. Think about Parks and Recreation as regardless of age or ability. Those are going to be the items that are going to serve the largest level of households in your community. If we're focused in on esports or skateboarding and BMX parks, it will have a great impact on your community, but a smaller proportion of folks. So especially when you're looking to expand programming, thinking about age and ability are really those two major barriers. Regardless of age or ability, most folks can participate in special events. As we get towards down the little unique ones, more youth sports, family programming, well, not every household is a family, not every household has children. And so you'll see some of those items down at the bottom. Again, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't offer additional youth programming or family programming in the community. I'm sure there's a need for it here in DeSoto. It's just fewer number of households, and that's why we see it kind of towards the bottom of that list. Go to our next one. It's household desire or want for following amenities now. Built amenities are a lot more difficult than our programming. So you can really test programming segments fairly easily. Walking paths and trails is, again, regardless of age and ability, typically you can use those paths. We see that nationally as a high priority for improvement when we run our analysis there. And then a new indoor all-purpose recreation facility, shiny stuff is always to follow. So if we put like a new pool or a new indoor facility, that stuff is always going to follow in priority order for that kind of thing. But walking paths and trails, a healthy desire for amenities, and then new indoor all-purpose recreation facility. Just about every community would say yes to one of those without being faced with like a bond question to follow it. So if we go to our next slide, satisfaction with customer service. Whitney was bringing this up earlier. Courteous and polite, 90% of the respondents who indicated that they contacted the city indicated that it was either always or usual the customer service was received was courteous and polite. I'm sorry I butchered that completely, but I was reading some of my text over to the right. So basically half of our respondents indicated they'd contacted us. Out of those 250 people, 90% said the people that they spoke to were courteous and polite. Of that 50% indicated that it was very easy to contact the person they needed to reach. 33%, so a total of 80%, said it was either very easy or easy to contact the person they needed to contact. What's funny is it sounds like most people are actually contacting the front office asking for water. that some of the reason that I'm focused on your billing is because most people are calling us for water, so there does seem to be something related to water going on here. About 20% contacted the front office, 10% the city clerk. But what I really want to harp on here again is that if people are concerned or dissatisfied with billing issues or with water generally, most of them are calling for water, a good proportion of those folks who are contacting. To get these always and usually rates as high as you have is really exceptional. Keeping in mind the bottom one has helped you resolve an issue to your satisfaction. Well, sometimes you might resolve my issue, but am I going to be satisfied with it? Maybe not. And so that's a difficult item. Only 1 in 10 respondents who'd contacted the city over the last year or so indicated that you did not resolve their issue to satisfaction. That is a very small proportion, and what that really does is promote brand loyalty with that group. And at 50%, that's about half your community. You can extrapolate that out generally, given the randomness of the sample and everything like that. You can extrapolate that to the whole community, and what that really does is just promote higher levels of satisfaction. We see both communication and customer service kind of ebb and flow with those quality of life ratings. These are really strong ratings. We'll continue to keep people satisfied with some of those services that we saw in other slides. I believe this is my last slide. I could be mistaken. I am mistaken. Economic growth and planning, and I apologize, I'm running long here, and I know you had other presentations tonight. But when we talk about economic growth and planning, this reason I wanted to include this particular chart, and then we have some word bubbles in there, is primarily because of the fact that our highest priority for improvement is related fairly closely to economic growth and planning. Down towards the bottom, really how well the city's managing and planning overall growth and development right in the middle. All the way down, we see about 1/3 or a little bit more of our respondents giving dissatisfied or very dissatisfied responses. We would say that neutral grades are passing, so it's a passing grade. It's not that I'm dissatisfied or very satisfied with a particular item, but there's a couple of items right there in the middle where there's relatively large levels of dissatisfaction, matching levels of satisfaction, and some folks in the middle that tell me that overall, most people are okay with what's going on, but there is some concern, and so it's important to people, which is why it's coming up as a high priority. So satisfaction is generally low because of the, some of the things that people don't like. Overall emphasis is really high, 56% of people selecting it as one of the top 2 most important things for the city to work on. And here we're seeing kind of a split of satisfaction, almost equal satisfaction, blue to red in that middle item, with about 30% neutral. And so there's kind of a big split in the community, but about 2/3 of folks are generally satisfied. About 1/3 of folks are just really dissatisfied with that particular item right now. We also asked some open-ended questions here. One of the major things that we found is that much fewer people left open-ended comments in 2024 compared to 2022. It could be a good thing. Typically, the open-ended comments are, furthest polarized people. They're, the ones that are willing to leave those comments, or they're just really bought in. And so you kind of get that mix of detractors, promoters, and then the folks that are just generally bought into the community. But we asked, what 3 words would you use to describe DeSoto? Similar to 2022, friendly, growing is kind of a new one there, but we see friendly all the way across. We see safe in most of those, quiet. We see growing in a couple, but overall, positive ratings there, positive words for the most part. When we see some of the larger words there, we see nice, clean, peaceful, location, quiet, friendly is huge. So a lot of good positive words. If we go to our next one, it's what would you like to improve about DeSoto? And this is just a little bit different. Affordable housing, 83rd Street, downtown area, hardware store. Hardware store was one that we saw a lot of in 2022. We also saw really just like a little bit of 83rd Street, I'd say, but a lot more in 2024 than we did previously. And then affordable housing is just kind of that national issue for folks. If we go forward one more. Again, what would you like to improve now about DeSoto? And I feel like I've gotten my text wrong here, so I apologize, folks. I'm pretty sure the prior table should have said Q27. What do you like most about DeSoto? I'm thinking, Whitney, when we talked about this, I replaced the wrong table, and so I apologize, Council. I'll get an updated copy of this presentation to staff tomorrow. If we go back one more, that is the correct word chart. So those are the things that they like about DeSoto. Those are the things we like. Downtown, a lot of people said downtown had been improved. If we go to our next one, that's where we're seeing some of the, would you like to improve? I apologize. I'm very concerned that I've made mistakes here, and I very much apologize for that. Yeah. I will redo this, and I very much apologize that I've made these errors Whitney and I were discussing these, and I was going back and forth, and I must have made a mistake somewhere in my stuff there, and I apologize. This is the end of the presentation, and I apologize for leaving on such a bad note, but if we go forward another slide, the residents now have my contact information, and they're more than happy. I'd more than be happy to speak with them about my errors as well. So I'll take any questions. Anything I can't answer tonight, I will answer tomorrow, and I will review 26, 27, and 28, and make sure that we get you all that right information on the slides there.
Questions from council? I'm not seeing any.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council. I appreciate the time and the courteousness for my mistakes, and I apologize for that. So I'll make it up to Whitney. We'll probably do that follow-up if you all would be interested in that. That'll be kind of my, hopefully, makeup for this particular error. So, Whitney, if you want to get in touch with me, I'll make sure you do that. Thank you all so much. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, we will move on. Item B, consider 2025 work plan draft.
Yes, Council, I apologize for the swing from very exciting stuff to much more drab stuff. Work plan draft, we talked about this at the last meeting, and I took a good, honest effort at incorporating the feedback that you had given me on several specific work elements that you wanted clarified or additional additions to the work plan throughout. And then there's also a column now for priority, just a very loose base priority 1 through 4. So I've asked the department heads to kind of fill in that column, and I've added the highlighted parts to the plan, which you had not seen. We'd always had the time frames on there, and I think everybody understood that time frames didn't necessarily mean the priority. So just because it's what happening in the first part of the year doesn't necessarily mean it's the highest or the highest priority. So I think everybody understood that. The last part really was the request to try and put some sort of a workload analysis to all this madness. Whitney, as usual, overachieved in that area. She provided this Gantt chart here about her workflow patterns. I even included this, I don't know, there's man hours included with this. She's not going to do this for every department, so I'm asking department heads, including myself, to come up with their own. I don't think they'll be as nice, but what I wanted to do is get consensus on the overall work plan before we ask to go and produce those per department. I think there's a recognition that there's more on this list than we will be able to accomplish. So this would be a good list to start with next year. That's it. I think we've kind of talked about a lot of this before, and I'd turn it over to you, Mayor, and Council for any further.
All right. Comments, questions, thoughts from council? Anybody? Start in.
I mean, I think the only thought I have looking at this, and trying to wrap all our brains around the massive amount of potential projects and work that could be done is maybe doing kind of quarterly check-ins.
Yeah.
Because I know, especially with with timelines, it's really easy for, time and urgency to take over priority, especially if you have some things that are lower priority but happen to fall in the front of the calendar, and just to kind of make sure that we're doing those check-ins, that the top priorities are getting the weight they deserve.
Yeah, there were a couple things that I brought up that have been picked up, so I appreciate that, Mike. I just think that was interesting hearing, aligning the resident survey, the community survey concerns. We got comp plan review picked up here. I think that's very important in dealing with the concerns about planning, so that there is that public engagement, there is that information going out. People do see the planning process in action. So I think you blew by it there, but yeah, I'm glad that comp plan review is in there. I think that's pretty darn important.
Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on.
Good.
Budget priorities.
Okay. Thank you, Council. Yes.
Is that, you don't need any?
No, no further. We'll take this and again, develop those work plan. And, yeah, it had been the intent, at least my thought, that, we'd come back quarterly. Maybe not an agenda item, but quarterly you'd kind of get this check-in like you were talking about. That's the intent. So good, thank you for that.
All right, on to the budget priorities.
I'll continue the trend of drier and drier topics as we get later into the evening, and I apologize.
Started out exciting.
It started out really great with those kids, and man, I was so impressed. And we're just gonna try not to put you all to sleep. It is exciting though. You know, we do have the envious position of having general fund balances and revenues that we did not expect, and so I think there's a recognition that as the primary one of the primary functions of the governing body is to put tax dollars to the best and most beneficial uses. So, very appropriate discussion to have. Of course, like with anything, we need to be very cautious about whether these are one-time benefits or lasting benefits, and do these with eyes wide open in terms of long-term projections. And when we say long-term, we've always meant 5 years. It had occurred to me that maybe we need to be thinking about 10 years. With some things, I don't think we're quite there yet. As you know, these projections are something that I toil over quite a bit. Agonize, I wouldn't put agonize, it's not fun, but it's not torture. But several levers here that we often tweak or move around have always had an impact, but now the impact is just magnified tremendously. When we look at these long-term projections on revenues, we know the revenues we received last year. You know, the sales tax exceeded revenues by $1 million or so. We know we had this kind of windfall benefit of investing this capital project money that resulted in a more than $3 million kind of one-time impact to the budget. So we know the money we have. The trick is to know the money that we're going to have and compare that to the services we're going to have to provide as the town grows. We have done, I think, I think I can say this is the best I can do in trying to project those. So the first part of this report really was focused on getting the level set of what happened in 2024, where those revenues came in, where the expenses came in. We have the month in, and we don't have a fiscal audit yet. We won't until May, but this is a position we're in quite a bit. Those numbers don't change drastically. There might be a couple thousand here or there that gets moved between accounts, but in general terms, we know what we collected, we know what we spent, we know where those fund balances are today. So the first part of the staff report really kind of spoke to establishing the year in 2024. When we adopted the budget, we thought, and this was back in September, we thought we would have a general fund balance of a little over $5 million. I updated those projections in December when we did those budget amendments. At that time, we thought it was going to be about $7.8 million. Turned out we've got about $8.8 million. We actually ended the year at 2024. So that's that's really the reason we're here talking about it. We knew this in September. And I think we've discussed before, our fiscal policy suggests a fund balance of 30% of overall operating revenues to maintain in that fund for unexpected things that occur during the year. Well, $8.8 million is more than 100%. It's a little over 100% of operating revenues. So it is important for us to consider why we what's all this, what to do with all this. So of course, as we look to do that, the couple things to keep in mind are those long-term projections. And so what I've done is I've taken that snapshot, projected it out 5 years, and I think you've seen sort of this chart here before, and I'll just scroll down to it. this is what the chart kind of looks like. So the biggest bar here is 2024 actual, that $8.88 million. The next two, the 7.4 and then the 6.7, those we have adopted, we would expect to end 2025 with $7.4 million. I've made some changes to those projections, and I'll discuss those here in a second. I think currently, as we currently sit right now, I'm going to have to lower those projections to somewhere around 6.7. So it was the intent, always the intent. We knew we'd have more money than the policy recommended. We knew we were going to be spending this down over the next. Always the intent to decrease that fund balance, and you'll see that as we go through. Couple things that have actually really one thing that I've changed are the future projections for franchise revenues. So we know that with Panasonic, with the building, the facility starting production this year, we had anticipated that those franchise revenues from that enormous power use were going to really positively impact the budget. Previous projections that we've used from 25 all the way out through 2031, what we've done is we've taken the projections that Evergy gave us based on Panasonic's power demand and their calculation of the 5% franchise revenue. We've cut those in half and plugged that in as our projection. So we were only guessing that we're going to get half of that, just to remain super conservative. And those were based on Panasonic's construction timeline, their operational timeline, and how. So what I'm suggesting now is that it does appear that Panasonic has shifted their startup by several months for one production line. And it looks like 6 to 9 months as the production lines come on. Their power demand has shifted 6 to 9 months into the future. So when we did the 2025 budget, we'd anticipated franchise fees from Panasonic to impact the 25 budget at $1.35 million. I'm cutting that by more than half to only $500,000. We thought we would get some bump in franchise revenues from the construction activities. We didn't see any of it. I guess they just used generators and on-site power for that. So it really is that application of the very conservative position that I feel like we really still need to maintain with these franchise revenues. We just don't know how that facility ramp up is going to occur, when that will occur, when actual full production will come online, and what that actually will look like. So given its enormous impact on our budget, I don't think it's advisable to count on a whole lot more than what I've shown. So essentially what I've done in the projections that you're seeing, taken 2025 from 1.35 down to 500,000, and then from 2026 on, I've adjusted those numbers down as well. Sales tax is another thing that has caused a great positive impact in 2024. We know that since construction activity, we have this chart. When those contractors started coming onto the site, we saw retail sales activity in DeSoto just skyrocket, more than double from the year before. And so we saw our sales tax revenues increase accordingly. The important part to keep in mind about that is that the improvements that Evergy has done and continues to do in the city, the substation construction, the construction of the transmission mains, all that work, when they purchased those materials, they paid sales tax on those materials, and that sales tax hit our sales tax. And so and you can look through line item by line item and see where Evergy is in that. They're a decent part of that. I would say 30% of that increase that we saw. And so that's not going to continue to happen. Eventually they'll be done building stuff. This year they'll be done. And so I guess all that is to say that's one good example of this transition that we've always kind of wondered about. We know sales tax is great now while they're building. How's that going to transition after the construction workforce leaves and the production workforce comes in and they start production of the facility? What's that going to look like? So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, I didn't necessarily change the sales tax projections a whole lot than what we had before. So in this chart here, you can see the 2024 actual sales tax into the general fund. It's like right over 3.6 million. The budget for next year is around about 2.8 million. So we're conservatively projecting a decrease in sales. I don't think it's going to be that much. I think the line will continue here and either flatten out or maybe a slight reduction. And now this doesn't account for maybe another project that comes into town, and those things that could happen. So I still think we're safely conservative on sales tax projections. The other thing to keep in mind with the projections, before we get to the fun stuff, expenditures that are already incorporated into these projections. So we talked about this when we did the budget. 2025 budget has a $2 million transfer from the general fund over the capital improvements fund. There's a similar $1 million transfer next year, projected for 26, but when we do the budget for 26, we'll look at it again. So that's $3 million we're throwing into the general fund within the next couple years. We're adding personnel, and then we also have the Panasonic TIF revenue expenses to account for. I thought it's important to remind ourselves about that. All that boils down to this. How much extra do we really have, do we think we have, to program some additional program, or to decide what to do? So the way I look at it is that you have this chart here. The blue line is the percentage of operating revenues. So this is that's our 30% target. If you look at the end years, the years 4, 5, and 6 out here, you can see that based on the current projections, the way they sit now, we're going to be sitting at still about 50% of operating revenues. I've also included a dotted line here of 30%, where our fiscal target is. So it's that difference between the 50% and the 30% that I would suggest we use as a benchmark for how much quote-unquote money we have excess money. That's with the projections now. If you subtract those two numbers, you get about 1.5 million. Another thing to keep in mind is that our fiscal policy, that 30% that we talked about, the intent of that and the practical application of that is that you want to have enough on reserve it's based on operating expenses. So you might be justified if you want to say, so for example, in 2025, the general fund has $2 million just transferred over to the CIP. That's not necessarily an operating expense. There's other just completely, discretional expenses like that you can look and that we project throughout. If you look at all those, it's about $1 million a year. And so you might take that off of their operating revenues. So the effect would be that your fund balance could be lower and you could still meet that intent of the 30. So if you did that, you're probably looking at about 1.8 million. So all I'm suggesting here is you got between $1.5 million and $1.8 million that I think very conservatively that we could consider as excess funds to either decide to do nothing, reduce taxes, or do something with. So I guess the last thing I would just encourage you to consider when you're thinking about this is there are many unknowns that we're facing right now with regard to very large scale economic development activities, and lots of very big things that could change this analysis in very big ways very quickly. The vast majority of those things, I would suggest, are positive. That would do nothing but make this situation better. There are possibly some unknown things, some big capital improvements we have to meet because of a problem we didn't know, or something in the market that could impact us negatively. I think in this environment that we are, the importance of remaining conservative with these projections, it's heightened. I think it's more important now than ever. So that's why I do think it's reasonable first to disagree with me. Feel free to do that. To think that we're being too conservative, I think reasonable people can think you're being too conservative here with some of the stuff, these projections I'm making. So I that's just to kind of wrap up. All right, that's how much we think we have. So I would like to get feedback, kind of a consensus moving forward, because the rest of this, And, you know, you talk about, okay, that's how much we got, now what are we gonna do with it? You know, this kind of informs that decision. So, I don't know if I need to pause there or not.
Sure, I
but-
think it's probably a good spot to
Yeah.
pause, right?
Okay. Because we're gonna start talking about fun stuff.
So I think it's probably wise to roll that franchise fee projection, but since we haven't collected $1 yet.
Yeah.
And
Bird in the
we're a
bush.
quarter of the way into 2020, almost, you know, into 2025, and knowing what we know, I think that is a reasonable assumption to make. And that probably be a little more slower on that roll up to that ultimate franchise amount we want to see out of that project. Point one, so my initial take is I think your yellow bar is I probably tend to agree with at this point, since we don't have those birds in hand yet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, other thoughts, comments from council?
I had a question. I know a few months back you had taken on kind of an audit of the franchise fees, if I remember right.
For Evergy.
For Evergy.
Just overall.
Overall.
Oh, right, yeah, that's been a while.
Yeah, I didn't know what
no.
the conclusion of that ever was.
Yeah, Jeff White is working on that, but probably time to get an update from him.
Yeah.
That was largely related to the what we were expecting
It was the
more,
construction, yeah, it was,
franchise
well, what
fee.
triggered it kind of was that they didn't know we'd annexed the
Oh,
site.
yeah, right, that's
and-
right,
And so they
yes.
hadn't been
Whether or not
collecting,
they-
that was very early on.
Yeah.
So it's not the reason that we don't
I
see it.
like your memory. I like
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, it could be it's 0, but it does strike me as odd.
Well,
that it's
I will say,
0.
yeah, no, I will say they run a month or so behind. And we know that the substation didn't get energized out there until, I want to say, maybe it was October, maybe November. We maybe should have seen it something by now. But, yeah.
Okay.
it's hard to
But-
say, yeah.
Yeah, it just might be good to check in on that and revisit that, just because it is such a big budgetary potential impact. I agree, at this point, until we have those answers and since we haven't seen any revenue from that at this point, I think adjusting to the yellow bar set of projections is probably a wise move.
Yeah, I appreciate and respect that that you led with consideration of one-time issues, because that is something that's gonna cause us to, or potentially cause some negative perceptions in any of this budget stuff, because we're gonna see declines.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see shrinking balances. And, sales tax, sales tax is definitely gonna decline.
Right.
So, but that isn't a bad thing, because even though you're dialing back now your franchise fee projection, which is the right thing to do, it's still miles ahead of where we would have been otherwise, or, with a baseline scenario. But most of our metrics are gonna look negative, or most of our measures are gonna look negative, and that's gonna look odd. Normally you'd say, what's going wrong? So I think that's just a mindset we've all gotta be in for probably an 18-month period, or to another budget cycle, that things are gonna ratchet down. But that isn't bad, because things are still up.
Well, you also got the apartments going in and you got growth, so you've got the other side.
Yeah, you should see some benefit
Yes,
from that as
benefit
well.
From that and the apartments and.
Although, like on the apartment thing, the perception that showed up in the survey where people are negative about multifamily, I think, but really it hadn't started yet. I think they're negative about the idea that they're being considered and approved here, not that they're actually happening, because we also have to see what tends to happen out of the actual employment base, or where these workers are actually going to come from, in terms of the pace at which the multifamily construction actually occurs here, even though it's been approved. So I think some of that perception may die down a bit. To the extent of using it, I think I think there's always that conservative part about, it's better to keep it in the savings account than it is to spend it. But let's also figure out, we do have it. Let's figure out where we can act on some of those things that do make a community impact, whether it's let's forge ahead with one of the phases of 83rd Street. Or let's forge ahead with one of the phases of 95th Street, or whatever it is that we've got it, let's apply it to the benefit of the community. So, I think there's some merit to not maybe looking at a 1.8 million, but the 1.5 or 1.3 or even $1 million and going, let's forge ahead with some of these things. I think one factor we're going to have to watch is things like we would have hoped for opportunities for, say, some transportation grants or some things like that we can apply for and have big matching funds now, right? If you got to match 20%, we can apply for some big grants.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not going to see those opportunities in the next 4 years, or at least in the next year or so. So we may not get to be able to build upon some of the leverage that we otherwise could.
I was gonna say, I agree with modifying the projections of the franchise fee revenues. We do know they are coming, it's just not as quick. And moving to the yellow line, that's all there. I do think, after having worked with you for 7 years, that you probably are being overly conservative, which is not a bad thing. But that kind of brings it back around to the spending, and this is kind of in line with what Kevin was saying, in that I'm not ready to say let's go spend. For the fact that we have 83rd Street that needs to happen, we've got high interest in the community center that we'll see, to where if we have the fund balance available to be able to pull the trigger on some of those projects that impact people, whether it be a phase of 83rd Street if we get matching grants, whether it be maybe even the start of land acquisition for a community center in the future, whether it be something that's tying into improving and increasing the community's services, the community's amenities, but at the same time also reserving some of that to make sure that we've got the capability when it comes time to go through the budget to continue to improve the property tax situation for the residents and be able to maintain a revenue neutral, if not even lower, capability if we can. So property taxes are up there high as far as making sure that we don't go the other direction. And then having the funds available to work on some of the bigger projects that we've been talking about. And even if it means we don't pull it this year, but we bank it into next year and basically start pre-funding those projects to where we've got the capital to do matching grants or to move forward without having to bond a lot of it.
Any thoughts to add, Danny? Gloria?
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, well, I think we can then move on to the use of excess funds. The first one, I have a host. This is just kind of spaghetti, right? We just tried to identify everything that I could think of that we could possibly spend money on. So I didn't ask department heads for a big list, but I just took some of the stuff we'd already had. So the first thing I'm suggesting here is let's just throw it all back to property tax reduction. So if you wanted to take that whole 1.5 to 1.8 million and just equate that to a mill levy reduction, and still maintain the 30% there at the end of the projection period, looks like we could reduce the mill levy by 1.7 mils, from 6.7 down to 5 mils. So that's that one. The other thing we could do is just take the whole chunk and throw it all into the CIP. That's what I've been working on this week is reconciling the capital improvements fund with all the Panasonic stuff and the bonds. Anyway, in preparation for this CIP overhaul that we'll be initiating. So that's the other thing you could do is use this placeholder to put it all over in there and prioritize this from those big impact type of projects. The third category are items that we've already identified in the annual work plan. So these are initiatives that could possibly come with a price tag associated with them, but we don't necessarily have a line item already in the 2024 budget. So I don't want to rehash all of those. You can read through those. Don't know that there's a great big item here that we need to discuss. If so, stop me. The fourth item group is increases to existing budgeted programs. So the things I'm identifying here is our chamber EDC investment. I see Tim's in the room. See him perk right up. We obviously have budget money for that those investments. We could consider additional investment in that. The property tax relief program, currently $25,000 annually. The art fund. We have one art fund member that's still in the room. I see. $25,000 annually there. Charitable gifts and contributions. We've had $10,000 in this for a number of years, and it usually doesn't get all used up. If we want to put more into that, we probably should come with a more robust program. Other than what we've got there. And then events. Let's just throw a bunch of parties, right? So, Whitney, I think something for everybody. Sheriff's Department raise increases. Yeah, we'll include the whole audience.
Sheriff's Department party? Is that?
Sheriff's Department parties. There we go. At the EDC with art. We're done. And then the last item, I think, it's worth suggesting do nothing. Just bank it. We invest at $1.5 million. We get $60,000 annually at current investment rates. So that's, without going line by line, those are the suggestions. I think we're going to follow this up quickly next month with the discussion on the capital improvements program. So I think that'll give a little more clarity as well. So, yeah, discussion item, no specific action requested from you, but just like to hear any direction you might have.
I think a lot of us got heard a lot of that. Get into that how that might get spent as well, right? I think.
Yeah. Some of the comments certainly. Yeah.
Just kind of to build on my comments, because I was kind of focused just on that first part of it. We do have some potential big ticket items in the CIP. I think, and not having, not needing bonds would be an attractive thing. But, it struck me when I was reading through this, I'm like, oh, we haven't finished overhauling the CIP to really get a full picture of that. And so I kind of feel like we need, we've got the cart before the horse a little bit on that one, where I think on a couple of these, even with the work plan, there's a lot of great things noted down here, but which of those are priority 1 versus priority 4, we don't quite have here yet. And so, and given timelines and everything, you shared that we haven't gotten input from department heads and whatnot. So, I mean, I guess my take reading through this is I'm like, wow, we've got a lot of great things we could potentially do. Maybe it's worth, taking the time to get CIP overhauled, running some prioritization rankings against some of the things that are in the annual work plan, and then, getting some feedback from department heads and other important priority influencers to see, are there any things where, gosh, if I could have this money, this is the really big impact we could make on the community. So that's kind of where my head's at.
Well, and thank you, because you did remind me of one unsolicited input that I did receive from Brandon, and this is no at all despair. He did want to remind you that we had a Peterbilt 548 that was discussed last year, about $400,000 that we did not purchase last year because the price had increased and we just couldn't afford it. So it's on the list as well. So I promised Brandon I would mention that. So now I
Yeah, and so I kind of feel like, yeah, we need a little more full picture before I'm ready to say, oh yeah, this is where we should take that that money. But I think there's a lot of potential good we can do for the community with this extra revenue.
Yeah, I think this is just to start us thinking, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Anything else on that item, Mike?
That was it. Yeah, no deadline on it. So, I think probably what it makes sense to do going forward is have that department head staff level engagement about this list. Let's get some priorities shaken out on that. Really focus on the CIP. And then let's have that CIP overhaul, and then we can, that's maybe March, April, we can revisit this in May before we start as we start into the 26 budget process. Sound good? Okay, good.
You wanna carry on?
I would just point out very good problems to have. Very good problems to have.
I'll let you go on. Advisory reports.
No report this evening, Mayor, thank you.
Patrick?
Just briefly, I don't think we have to discuss it too much this evening, but I did have a conference with an attorney representing the National Scouting Organization. It sounds like the plan for the Scout House is to sell it, privately, and then take the proceeds to hopefully get Scouts started back in DeSoto. But they did just want to know if the city had any interest in the Scout House. It's a building right behind Great American Bank.
Is everybody familiar with where the Scout House is? Courtney, you're not?
Now we know, yeah. Just honestly, until now I didn't know.
Tiny, rough little building.
Yeah. So yeah.
Like a 60 by 150 lot, right behind the.
Well, has a basement in it too.
800 square feet or so.
Reasonably well done.
So are there any thoughts, would we have any interest in a right of first refusal if we don't want to buy it, or just let it go to the market, or?
What would we use it?
I don't know. That's,
With the location and size, I can't think of anything that the city would have a use for.
Yeah, I'd say let whatever market.
Maybe the chamber, Tim. Just kidding.
Place to throw all those parties.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, it sounds like I'll just let them know that
I'm fine with
We
market.
don't have a plan for it, we don't have a,
It's not really big enough to do much with, so.
perfect. That's all for me.
It's
All right,
it's
thank
not
you,
like
Pat.
you could make it a great art and public space area, cause it's behind everything where nobody'd see it. No parking.
all right. No city engineer, no planner, so we will go on to Brandon, Assistant City Administrator. Where are you at now, Brandon?
I know it's getting late. I just wanted to give the council an update. That community center feasibility study, we got an update from the surveyor. We've done 479 responses as of last night. And so we're looking for about 650. This is gonna continue on through, I believe the 24th is the last day, excuse me. That'll come out. So we're moving along. Gotten a lot of interest, couple questions from the public about it. So strong interest in the survey. We'll come back to you in probably April with the findings of that. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Council comments. Danny, anything for the group tonight?
Nothing, Mayor, thank you.
Victoria? Rob?
I was gonna say no, then I thought of a couple things. I attended the school board meeting Monday night, which was actually very, very interesting because the three main topics that they had for discussion was the enrollment survey that they did for projections on student enrollment in the next 5 years, 10 years. They had Flint Meadows there to discuss the possibility of the RHID with, well, actually not discuss the possibility, but at least kind of educate them on what it is, since they'll have potential veto authority over the RHID. And then they also started the discussion of if, and this is a big capital IF, not that they're planning on doing it, but if they ever dispose of Countryside Elementary School, the old Countryside Elementary School, and I didn't realize they actually have 2 parcels that goes all the way to 103rd Street, and one of the parcels is without a building on it, which means they can dispose of it however they want. But the one with the building on it, the state of Kansas actually has first right of refusal on disposal of that property. And there's a whole timing mechanism, so it was introducing the school board to, if we were to dispose of it, whether it be, if they were to dispose of it, to selling it to a private party, if it was the, okay, we're gonna sign it over to the city for community center. I mean, no matter who it disposes to, it was just that part of it. But the enrollment numbers and things were actually kind of fascinating. So a couple of things, one unrelated to us, but we have our residents ask us a lot about it. The Arise development on 83rd at Cedar Niles. As of last week, they've sold 28 homes in that development. That development on south and north side has the potential of 600 homes, and they're looking at doing about 60 per year, is kind of the numbers that they shared. So that was one of those ones, had not heard some of those numbers before. The other interesting thing was enrollment in the school districts overall, and this kind of goes to, as we look at trying to make the school district whole and things like that, the enrollment numbers in the school districts overall in Johnson County are declining fairly rapidly. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at birth rates and what it takes birth rate wise to keep a population going, and it takes about 2.2 children per couple. Birth rate in Johnson County is about 1.4 to 1.6. Which means if you do a look right now of how many births did we have this year, in 5 years, those are kindergartners. So while most of the school districts across, and this is what delayed, kind of like our community center study of we're in a weird area. The school district survey on student enrollment was delayed because they had to kind of go back and rework some of the numbers. And the numbers did take into account things like Flint Meadows. It did take into account Arise. So they were forward projecting the developments that most have already been announced or discussed. And while most school districts in Johnson County are seeing a decline, we are holding steady in USD 232 with a slight projection. And when I first heard the numbers, I'm like, that's all? But when you look at what goes into it, and it's a big, long survey, in 5 years, they're projecting our school district to increase by 122 students. For the whole district. And in 10 years, it's only about 286 students. So while other districts are looking at shrinking, we're holding steady, but not by a lot. So like I said, that's kind of neither here nor there, but I figured it was a very interesting meeting to listen and see the things. The survey, I believe, is available online. So that's just kind of an update on what we're seeing with the school district as far as enrollment numbers. So when people come and go, well, all this growth is going to mean that the schools get crowded. Well, no, it means the schools are going to hold even and grow slightly at this point, is what it's looking like by the very large study that they had done. So that's what I've got tonight.
All right, thank you.
Nothing for me.
All right, Kevin.
No, I'm out of gas.
Nothing here, so.
All right, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. All right, we're adjourned.
This conference is no longer